I didn't think much of it at first. Just another rainy morning in eastern Colorado, the kind where the ground turns to this heavy gray soup that clings to your boots and makes everything feel slower than it should be. I stepped out with my coffee, same routine I'd had for the past year, and something looked off. Not wrong exactly, just different. Then I saw it. Concrete. Fresh, pale, still damp at the edges, running in a clean line about 12 feet across what was very much, undeniably, my land. I stood there longer than I'd like to admit, just staring at it, trying to make sense of how someone could pour a slab that size without ever thinking, hey, maybe we should check whose property this is. But deep down, I already knew exactly who did it. And that was the moment I realized something I probably should have understood months earlier. This wasn't just about land anymore. This was about people deciding I didn't matter. My name's Daniel Whitaker. I'm 46 years old, civil engineer by trade, mostly municipal work, drainage systems, road grading, the kind of stuff nobody notices unless it fails. I'd spent 22 years solving problems most people don't even see, and about a year before all this started, I bought myself a piece of land just outside a small town called Mill Ridge, out in Weld County. 3.4 acres. Odd shape. Slightly lower than the surrounding lots. Clay-heavy soil. To most people, it looked like a bad investment. To me, it looked like peace. See, I'd just come out of a divorce. Nothing dramatic, no big explosion, just two people realizing somewhere along the way they stopped being on the same team. My ex, Laura, stayed in Denver with our son, Caleb. I moved out here, needed space, needed quiet, needed something that felt like mine again. And that land, it gave me that. It wasn't pretty. No big house, no manicured lawn. Just open ground, a small gravel driveway I'd put in myself, and a prefab workshop I spent about $18,700 setting up. But I knew what it could be. I knew how land like that behaved, how water moved across it, how it connected to everything around it. What I didn't expect was how quickly other people would decide it was worthless. First time I heard it was maybe 3 weeks after I moved in. I was unloading some lumber when this woman pulled up in a white Lexus SUV, clean, polished, the kind of vehicle that tells you everything about how someone sees themselves. She stepped out, sunglasses, clipboard, posture like she was already annoyed before she even got there. Daniel Whitaker? She asked. That's me. I'm Sharon Bell. I'm the president of the Ridgeview Community Association. I nodded, wiped my hands on my jeans. All right. She looked past me, scanning the property like she was inspecting damage. That parcel, she said, pointing vaguely, has been a concern for some of the residents. Concern how? Well, she gave this tight little smile. It's largely unused. Low-lying. Not particularly functional. I almost laughed. It's my land. It's functioning just fine. She didn't laugh. We like to maintain a certain standard in this community, Mr. Whitaker. Properties that appear neglected can affect overall value. Neglected? I looked around. I just moved in. Yes, and we'd like to be proactive. That was the word she used. Proactive. What she meant was control. After that, it started small. Kids cutting across the property like it was a shortcut. I didn't mind at first, figured it was harmless, until someone left a bike laying in the mud, and I nearly ran it over with my truck. Then came the yard waste. Grass clippings, branches, one time a whole busted patio chair dumped near the edge. I cleaned it up, told myself it wasn't worth making a scene. Then the letters started. First one was polite enough. Friendly reminder regarding property upkeep. Nothing official, no fine. I let it slide. Second one had more edge. Mentioned standing water concerns, suggested I take corrective action. That one made me pause. Because standing water, that wasn't random language. That's technical. That's regulatory. That's someone either guessing or thinking they know something they don't. I wrote back. Simple, professional. Explained the grading, runoff patterns, that the land was intentionally left as is. No response. Third letter came about 3 weeks later. Certified mail this time. Cited section numbers from HOA bylaws, threatened fines. $150 initial, then $25 per day if not remedied. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, reading that letter over and over, feeling this slow, steady pressure build behind my eyes, not explosive anger, just that quiet kind that settles in your chest and stays there. Because here's the thing, I knew they didn't understand what they were talking about, but they were acting like they did. And worse, they were starting to believe it. The neighborhood itself, about 40 homes, newer builds mostly, people who'd moved out here for the space but still wanted some version of structure. HOA wasn't optional. You bought in, you agreed. I'd read the documents. All 87 pages of them. Nothing in there gave them the authority they were trying to use. But people like Sharon, they don't operate on what's written. They operate on what no one challenges. I tried to keep it civil, knocked on a few doors, introduced myself properly. Most folks were fine, polite, a little distant, but not hostile. Except for one guy. Rick Dalton. Late 50s, contractor type. Big build, always in work boots. Drove a lifted black F-250 that looked like it had never seen a job site. He lived right along the edge of my property. First time we talked, he didn't even bother with small talk. "You planning to do anything with that land?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, "leave it alone." He smirked. "Shame. Could be useful." "For who?" He shrugged. "Neighborhood." That word again. "Not yours. Not mine. Neighborhood." I remember looking at him, really looking, and thinking, this guy's already decided something. And I wasn't part of that decision. Things escalated slowly after that, the way they always do, not one big moment, just a series of small pushes, each one a little further than the last. Then came the rainstorm. Late April. One of those sudden Colorado storms that dumps 2 inches in under an hour. I was inside working when I heard it. Water moving, fast, heavy, wrong. I stepped outside and saw it immediately. Runoff, redirected, flowing straight across my property in a way it never had before, and leading right toward where that fresh concrete would appear just a few days later. I stood there in the rain, boots sinking into the mud, watching the water carve new paths across land I knew better than most people ever would. And something clicked. Not anger. Not yet. Just clarity. They didn't think my land was useless. They thought it was theirs. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not because I was angry, at least not in the way people expect. It was quieter than that. More focused. The kind of thinking that happens when something finally lines up and you realize you've been looking at the wrong problem the whole time. By morning, I had my boots on, coffee gone cold on the counter, and I was already pulling old project habits back into place: notebook, measurements, photos, timestamps. I walked the entire perimeter of my property, slow and methodical, marking every place where the water had shifted. You could see it clear as day if you knew what to look for: new erosion lines, displaced gravel, sediment trails where there shouldn't have been any. And then I walked over to Rick's side. He was out there already, like he'd been expecting me. "Morning," he said, not even looking up from the edge of that concrete slab. "That yours?" I asked. He finally looked at me, squinting a little in the sun. "Improvement," he said. "Helps with drainage." "On my land." He shrugged. "Water's gotta go somewhere." I let that sit for a second. "Yeah," I said. "It does." Then I turned around and walked back to my truck. Didn't argue. Didn't raise my voice. That probably confused him more than anything. By noon, I was in downtown Mill Ridge, parked outside the county clerk's office. Old brick building, creaky floors, smells like paper and dust and time. I'd been in places like that 100 times for work, but this felt different. This time, it was personal. A woman named Janet worked the records desk. Late 60s, reading glasses hanging on a chain, the kind of person who knows exactly where everything is without needing to check. "What can I help you with?" she asked. "I need everything on parcel 14B, I said. "Plats, easements, drainage plans, anything recorded." She raised an eyebrow. "Going back how far?" "As far as it goes." That got a small smile out of her. "All right then." It took about an hour, maybe a little more. She brought out folders, then boxes, documents stamped, folded, some so old the ink had started to fade at the edges. I sat there flipping through page after page, letting my brain do what it's trained to do: connect patterns, fill gaps, see structure where other people see noise. Subdivision plans from 1998. Original grading reports. Drainage impact assessments. And then, I found it. A site plan, stamped and signed by a firm out of Fort Collins, dated June 12, 1999. I leaned in closer, tracing the lines with my finger. There it was. My land, labeled clearly. Stormwater retention area, lot 14B. I felt something shift in my chest. Not excitement. Not yet. Just confirmation. I kept digging. There were notes attached, references to county requirements, Something about runoff mitigation for 11 surrounding parcels. I pulled another file, cross-referenced it with the county code. Section 11 to 203. Stormwater management compliance. I sat back in that chair, stared at the ceiling for a second, and let out a slow breath. Son of a, I muttered under my breath. Janet looked over. You find something interesting? I gave a small nod. Yeah, I think I did. By the time I got back home, the sun was already dropping low, casting that long golden light across the property. And for the first time since all this started, I wasn't seeing it the way they saw it. I was seeing it for what it actually was. Not useless. Essential. Every bit of runoff from those higher lots. Rick's, Sharon's, half the street, it all drained toward this land. Not by accident. By design. And if that system got disrupted, if the grading changed, if flow got blocked or redirected, it wouldn't just be my problem. It would be everyone's. I called someone I trusted. His name's Carl Benson. We'd worked together on a couple of municipal projects years back. Older guy, maybe early 60s now, semi-retired but still sharp as hell. He picked up on the second ring. Danny, he said, haven't heard from you in a while. Yeah, I said, leaning against my truck, looking out over the land. I got a situation. I walked him through it. The concrete, the redirected runoff, the documents I'd found. There was a pause on the line. Then he chuckled. Let me guess, he said. They think your land's the problem. Something like that. Well, if those plans are accurate, your land isn't the problem. I know. It's the solution. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. Yeah. Another pause. Then his tone shifted, more serious. You got documentation? Starting to. Good. Because if they've altered flow patterns without permits, he let that hang for a second. They're in violation. Not HOA rules. County code. That hit different. HOA you argue with. County code, you don't. The next few days turned into a routine. Morning, document everything. Photos, measurements, water flow after light rain. I even pulled out my old laser level, checked elevations across a few key points. Differences weren't huge, maybe 3, 4 inches in some areas, but enough. Enough to change direction. Afternoon, more research. I went back to the clerk's office twice, pulled additional filings, found a modification request from 2003 that had been denied, something about preventing unauthorized alteration of designated retention zones. Evening, organizing. I set up folders on my dining table, printed copies, labeled everything. Dates, references, cross notes. It started to look less like a home and more like a project site office. And somewhere in the middle of all that, something changed in me. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was building a case. A few neighbors started noticing. There's a guy 2 houses down, Mark Ellison, quiet, keeps to himself, retired mechanic. He stopped by one afternoon while I was taking measurements. You getting serious about this? He asked. Looks that way. He nodded slowly, glanced over toward Rick's place. People been talking, he said. Some think you're overreacting. I smiled a little. They usually do. He hesitated, then added. Others think, maybe they pushed too far. That stuck with me. Because that's how these things shift. Not all at once. Just a few people starting to wonder if they picked the wrong side. Then came the first move. I drafted a letter. Not emotional. Not aggressive. Professional. Cited the original subdivision plan, referenced County Code Section 11 to 203, included photos, measurements, and a formal request. Immediate removal of unauthorized structures and restoration of original drainage conditions within 14 days. I sent it certified, not just to Rick, to Sharon, to the HOA board, and to the county planning office. The response came faster than I expected. 2 days later, Sharon showed up. Same white Lexus. Same sunglasses. But something about her posture, tighter this time. She walked up, letter in hand. What exactly is this? She asked, holding it up like it offended her. It's a notice, I said. You're threatening legal action? I'm informing you of a violation. Her jaw tightened. We have every right to address issues affecting the community. Not if those issues are required infrastructure. She paused, just for a second. That was the first crack. I don't think you understand, she started. No, I said, calm, steady. I don't think you do. I stepped past her, gestured toward the land. This property isn't in used. It's designated retention. It handles runoff for at least 11 lots in this subdivision. She stopped, recalibrating. That hasn't been enforced in years. That doesn't make it go away. Silence. Wind moved across the grass, dry and steady. She lowered the letter slightly. You're making this into something bigger than it needs to be. I looked at her, really looked this time. It already is. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. Mr. Whitaker, a voice said. Yeah. This is Thomas Reed, County Inspection Office. We received documentation regarding a potential drainage compliance issue. I leaned back in my chair, slow exhale. Yeah, I said. You did. We'll be scheduling a site visit within the next 48 hours. I glanced out the window, toward that slab of concrete catching the last light of the day. Good, I said quietly. Because it's about time someone took a look. And that's when things stopped being neighborhood drama and started becoming a problem nobody could ignore. The inspector showed up right on time. 2 days later, just after 9 in the morning, sky clear, wind cutting across the open land the way it always does out here, carrying that dry, dusty smell of early summer. I was already outside when the county truck pulled up. White, official seal on the door, clipboard on the dashboard. Rick was outside too. Didn't surprise me. He leaned against his fence like he was just casually enjoying the morning, but you could tell. He was watching everything. Sharon arrived about 10 minutes after that. Same Lexus. No sunglasses this time. That was new. The guy who stepped out of the county truck introduced himself as Daniel Harper, mid-40s, clean-cut, no-nonsense type. The kind of person who doesn't waste words because he doesn't need to. Mr. Whitaker, he asked. That's me. He shook my hand, firm grip. You filed the complaint? I submitted documentation, I said. He gave a small nod. Let's take a look. We walked the property together, slow and methodical. I showed him everything, the elevation changes, the redirected runoff paths, the concrete slab, the erosion lines. I didn't oversell anything. Didn't need to. The evidence spoke for itself. Harper crouched near the edge of the slab, ran his hand along the surface, then looked up at Rick. This yours? He asked. Rick pushed off the fence, walked over like he still had control of the situation. It's an improvement, he said. Helps manage water. Permitted. Rick hesitated. Just for a second. That wasn't necessary, he said. Harper stood up slowly, brushed his hands off. It was, he said flatly. Silence settled over the three of us. Then Harper turned to me. You have the original site plan? I handed him the folder. He flipped through it, stopping at the same page I'd found days earlier, the one labeled Stormwater Retention Area. He studied it for a moment, then exhaled through his nose. Yeah, he muttered, almost to himself. That's what I thought. Sharon stepped forward then, trying to regain some footing. This area hasn't been actively maintained in years, she said. The community has had ongoing concerns. Harper didn't even look at her when he interrupted. Ma'am, he said, still scanning the document. This isn't about maintenance. This is designated infrastructure. That word hit harder than anything else so far. Infrastructure. Not optional. Not cosmetic. Required. He finally looked up. Any alteration to this without county approval is a violation of Section 11 to 203. Sharon blinked. And if those alterations impact runoff to adjacent properties, he continued, you're looking at compounded liability. Rick shifted his weight. Liability how? He asked. Harper turned toward him fully now. Flood risk. Property damage. Non-compliance fines, starting at $500 per day, per violation. Rick's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. The confidence slipped. Just a little. We spent another hour walking through everything. Measurements. Photos. Notes. Harper didn't rush, didn't speculate, just documented. By the end of it, the air felt different. He closed his folder, looked between all of us. I'll be filing an official report, he said. You'll receive notice within 72 hours. Rick opened his mouth like he was about to argue, then thought better of it. Sharon didn't say anything at all. They both just stood there quiet. And for the first time since this whole thing started, they looked uncertain. The notices came 3 days later. Certified mail. Multiple envelopes. Rick's violation was the worst of it. Unauthorized construction within a designated retention zone. Alteration of natural drainage patterns. Failure to obtain permits. Total estimated penalties, if unresolved, sitting somewhere around $12,500 within the first month. Sharon and the HOA weren't off the hook either. Failure to enforce recorded easement conditions. Improper issuance of fines. Potential liability exposure. That one, that shook her. She came by that evening. No clipboard this time. No posture. Just tired. Daniel, she said, standing at the edge of my driveway. We need to talk. I nodded toward the workshop. Come on. We sat inside, the air still warm from the day, faint smell of sawdust and motor oil hanging in the space. She didn't sit right away, just stood there for a second, looking around like she was seeing everything differently. I didn't know, she said finally. I leaned back in my chair. You didn't ask. She exhaled slow. We've been trying to maintain standards in this neighborhood. Property values, appearances, people expect a certain level of control. I said. She looked at me. Consistency, she corrected. I gave a small nod. And you thought this land didn't matter. It looked like it didn't. That was honest, at least. And now? I asked. She hesitated. Now I understand it does. Rick didn't come over. Not that night. Not the next day either. But about a week later, he showed up. No attitude this time. No smirk. Just a guy who'd done the math and didn't like the outcome. I'll remove it, he said, nodding toward the slab. All of it. I crossed my arms. And the grading? Restore it. Professionally, I added. He nodded. Yeah. We stood there for a second, wind moving through the grass between us. I didn't think it was a big deal, he said. I know, I replied. That was the problem. It took about 3 weeks to fix everything. Concrete got broken up and hauled off. Cost him around $4,800 from what I heard. A grading crew came in after that, reworked the slope, restored the flow patterns. I walked it with them, made sure it matched the original specs with intolerance. The HOA backed off completely. Fines disappeared. Letters stopped. Sharon stepped down about a month later. Said it was for personal reasons, but everyone knew. Things got quiet again after that. Not awkward quiet, just normal. People still waved when I drove by. A couple of them even stopped to talk, asked questions about the land, about how it all worked. Mark came by with a six-pack one evening, sat on the tailgate of my truck like nothing had ever happened. You shook things up, he said. Didn't plan to. Still did. I looked out over the property, the way the ground settled now, water moving exactly how it was supposed to after a light rain, no chaos, no guessing, just balance. A few months later, my son Caleb came out to visit. We stood out there together, him kicking at the dirt with his boot, looking around. This is the place everyone was complaining about, he asked. Yeah. He glanced at me. Doesn't look useless. I smiled a little. Yeah, I said, funny how that works. Here's the thing, though. I didn't win because I fought harder. I won because I understood something they didn't. Most people only value what they can see. Flat ground, clean lines, things that look finished. But the stuff that actually matters, the systems, the structure, the parts that keep everything else from falling apart, those are usually invisible and easy to underestimate. So I'll leave you with this. If you were in my position, and a whole neighborhood decided your property didn't matter, would you have let it go? Or would you have done exactly what I did and reminded them, the hard way, that just because something looks useless doesn't mean it is? Let me know what you think. I'm curious where you land on that.